Alright, I'm Jimmy. I did a pretty similar project to Haley's, so instead of doing things on feedback, mine was kind of focused around mastery learning. Mine was in a 7th grade class in Findlay, Ohio. So, and if you don't know mastery learning, it's basically not moving on until everyone has mastered the material via some sort of assessment. I'll get into that a little more later. But basically, you have two groups of students. You have your mastery learning group, and then who are just working to master the current material. And then you have an enrichment group for those students who have already mastered the material. So those students will be doing more just real world examples, just more in depth on the subject, but not actually moving on to the next subject until the entire class has proved some mastery over the current topic. So what I did was I did my project over 4 weeks. I broke it into 2 sections. I did 2 weeks of just what I call normal instruction. It wasn't 100% direct instruction, but that was a lot of it included. It was kind of direct instruction, some group activity, just your normal day, every classroom stuff. And then the second 2 weeks, I really focused on mastery learning. That's just, we did a lot of group work within the learning groups, and just a lot of assessment, a lot of kind of remediating stuff. But what I did was, for each of the weeks, this was done over, we started with evaluating expressions and combining like terms in the first week. Then we did like the distributive property and solving one-step equations, which was week 2. Week 3 was multi-step equations and simple inequalities. And then the 4th week was graphing. So we were graphing linear equalities and inequalities. And then the first 2 weeks were obviously the normal instructional time, and then the second 2 were the mastery learning. So what I did at the beginning of every week, I came up with a self-efficacy assessment on the students, similar to what Haley was talking about. I did a 1 to 5 scale. Each one of mine had 6 questions on it. So basically they earned a score out of 30, and that's how kind of I compared all of my data. With that, I also gave them a pre-assessment. So the pre-assessment was very similar to the final assessment. Actually, it was the exact same. They just kind of changed the numbers, or maybe if it were like a word problem, like just a similar different scenario though. So I gave those, unlike Haley, I had blocked periods. So I had 90 minutes of instruction every day of the week. So it was kind of nice. You have a lot of time to give assessments and then still have class. So basically I could give this test for pre-assessment and then still have a 45-minute block to actually teach class. So that was pretty nice. So during my first 2 weeks, what I did was I didn't even look at the pre-assessments. I gave them to the students and then I just put them in a pile. I kind of just didn't want any bias on my part, so I just kind of set it to the side. I wanted to keep everything as normal as possible while still trying to collect the data. So what I noticed actually I also on the pre-assessments, I gave them a score, like a percentage score. Everything was based on a rubric. And then I also, each of the 4 skills, I marked how many of the skills that they had mastered, if that kind of makes sense. So what I noticed was that over the course of the week, and towards the end, I gave the same assessment. But what I started to notice was that the scores, they improved quite a bit. A lot of the self-efficacy stuff was pretty low, in all honesty. And then during the weeks of mastery learning, I saw that they actually jumped. The students really enjoyed doing more mastery learning. I focused it in on 2 groups of people, what I call high self-efficacy students and low self-efficacy students. The high ones scored, I think it was like above an 18 out of the possible 30, and the low ones scored below that. But what I noticed while doing the mastery learning was that the lower level students really improved. They really benefited from the extra attention that they got from being in a mastery learning group versus being kind of just one of the people in the back of the class. Because I have about 30 kids in each of the classes. So I mean, not to say that it's really people max, but if some students want to be invisible, they can kind of be invisible in class. So it really focused, like, I mean, when these groups get down to like 3 or 4 students, it's really focused in. Some of them really didn't like it because they got real nervous and I don't know, they just didn't like the extra attention. But overall, their scores really improved. I think I had 68 students, and during a normal instructional period, their self-efficacy grew like 54% from the beginning of the week to the end of the week on average, and then during the mastery learning, it was like 73%. So it really improved. So that's just kind of what I learned. I guess I have 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Okay, did you do this in all, I guess you don't have that many students, so you did it in all your classes?
I did it in all 3. I only have 3 classes.
Okay.
So I did it in all 3 of my classes.
Okay, did you continue that, that basis for your teaching afterward the project?
Still, I kind of mix it in a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, one of the downfalls of it is it does take a long time and a lot of planning.
Yeah.
Like, you have to literally plan things for your enrichment group, and it's kind of, you don't really have a lesson a day, it's just kind of fluid.
Mm-hmm.
So you just, once everyone's mastered it, you just kind of jump into the next thing. So you have to have basically all week just ready to go in both lesson and enrichment. But I mean, I try to still do kind of some of the similar stuff. Anything else?
Did you ever find that you had students that literally could not master? Like,
Um,
as hard as they tried, they just couldn't.
I mean, sometimes, there were some situations where you really just had to kind of pull teeth out of the student just to, I mean, that's just kind of when it got down to like 3 students in that mastery learning group. But I mean, kind of repetition, you kind of eventually start to get it. And whether that actually stuck or not.
Garrett, did you run any test of significance, such as t-tests or finding standard deviation or anything like that? To prove that it is actually a significant difference.
Well, I did some R correlation. So I noticed that between the self-efficacy scores and the the improvement, I found an R correlation coefficient of, I think it was like 0.7. So I mean, moderate correlation. I mean, it wasn't perfect, obviously. There were some students who did not benefit as much, especially the upper level / like middle to upper level students who kind of could have benefited from the extra attention and participating in class 100% of the time. I feel like they could have gone either way, but as a whole, I felt like it benefited the class, and especially the lower self-efficacy group, the students who just really hate math and just couldn't do whatever taught them, or just didn't want to. Anything else?